Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is Steven. In today's video, we're going to talk about 5 different ways to make money in real estate. Some of these ways you probably can already think of. Some of them maybe not, maybe they're new to you, maybe not new to you, but I think this is very relevant for where we're at in the real estate market in 2023. Right, way number 1, and where most people get started, is single family rentals. Most people get started here because it's pretty straightforward. There's not too many complicated things about it. There's not fancy underwriting, and there's an abundance of houses, unless you live in 2023. That said, there's still more houses available in 2023 today than there is probably large multifamily properties for sale. So, barrier to entry, a lot easier if you don't really know what you're doing or you're just getting your feet wet. It's a good way to understand and get a feel for what it's like to interact with tenants, and then typically you just keep growing and growing from there. This is actually how I first got my start. I got my first start by buying a $46,000 house. It was rented out for $900 a month, and I still own that house today, but I no longer really invest in single family rentals. The second type of rental or class that people typically get into when it comes to rental properties is then the small multifamily property. And here's what I mean by small multifamily property. This could be a duplex, a triplex, a quadplex, or like all the way up to maybe a 10-unit building. Now, if you're thinking about this, I think it's a great idea typically to buy more doors than less doors. There's a whole bunch of reasons for this, but before we get to those, I want to talk about the difference between a 4-unit property, 4-unit multifamily, and a 5-unit multifamily property. It's very important that you understand this if you're going to start buying these types of properties. If you buy a 4-unit multifamily property, it still qualifies for conventional home loans. This means you still get a 30-year amortization, you still get a fixed interest rate, and you get all of those benefits that you would get if you're buying a house, even though you're buying 4 doors. This is why I really recommend going more towards 4 doors if you're going to use conventional financing than just buying a house. But when you're getting started, hey, you got to get started where you get started. Now, once you move to 5 units, things start to change. 5 units no longer qualify for conventional home loans. This means that you're going to need to go get a true commercial loan. Now, the thing with true commercial loans, you're going to go to like a community bank. You could go to a bigger bank, but I would recommend going to a community bank or maybe a credit union and talking to them. The thing about conventional, or not conventional loans, the thing about commercial loans is that the amortization schedule starts to change. Typically, instead of being 30 years, it's 20 years. So this is something you need to take into consideration when you're running the numbers, is that your amortization schedule is going to change. Also, they don't like to fix the interest rate over the entire amortization schedule. So when you have a conventional home loan, you have 30 years and it's fixed for 30 years. That's your interest rate's fixed for 30 years. With a commercial loan, it might only be fixed for 5 years, or it might be fixed for 7 years, but typically not. So your debt on a 5-unit is not going to be as nice as debt on a 4-unit. I recommend, if you're buying a 4-unit, do the best you can to try and get a conventional home loan on it. This is why I recommend, if you're going to go to 5 units, don't even mess around with a 5-unit unless it's like this absolutely great deal and you're early on in your career or whatever. I recommend trying to get a little bit bigger, get 10 units or whatever, because you're borrowing more money, and when you borrow more money, banks kind of get more interested because their job is to place money. You're doing them a service, they're doing you a service, you're helping everyone out. Anyways, this is the second type of rental property or real estate that people typically start investing in. Now, something that's more recent to come about is short-term rentals. And this comes about because of the excitement of Airbnb. I do not do Airbnb personally, so I don't know all the intricacies of it. But I do know this, that generally, rule of thumb, you're probably going to make 2, maybe 3 times as much revenue per month as you would with a long-term rental. I mean, it's way more intensive. You're more in the hospitality business than just the real estate business. So that's something to take into mind. Also, you need to be aware of regulations. When Airbnb got started, it wasn't like this is the first time short-term rentals came about, but it became a lot easier to facilitate and find tenants. That's really what Airbnb is a broker for short-term renters, right? And so it just made it easier to access. Now, as it became easier to access, lots of people did it because there was a lot of money to be made at the time, and now cities are catching up. They're saying, hey, we want to kind of keep control over what short-term rentals look like, because we've already had this for a long time. It's called hotels and motels, and they're regulated differently, so why are the short-term rentals not regulated the same? Short-term rentals can be a great vehicle to get in. I mean, you can make quite a bit of money with just a few properties. You definitely want to do your research, though. You're probably going to make more money in more destination locations, obviously, but the properties are going to be significantly more expensive because that kind of arbitrage opportunity has kind of went away. And what I mean by that is you could buy at a long-term value, right? A long-term rental value, but you could get 2 to 3 times as much revenue because it was short-term and you were charging accordingly. In those more destination markets, that stuff has probably become compressed and that arbitrage opportunity has probably gone away for a good amount. The fourth way, or fourth type of property, is actually land. And I could mean land in 2 ways. Way number 1 is that you actually rent it out for like recreation. Maybe you have a woods and you rent it out or lease it out to people who are going to camp or something like that. You would have to obviously kind of set some things up for that, but you'd still do it and you'd still make pretty good money. Now, you wouldn't. Generally, your infrastructure costs would be a little bit lower, but it is a way to do that. The other way that I can mean by this is also like land leases. So sometimes what happens is a business, say like a bank or something, wants to build a branch. And so what they'll do is they'll want a prepared site that the actual real estate investor has prepared for them with all the utilities and all that type of stuff pulled to it. And then they'll take care of everything else and build the building, and then it'll be just, land leased back to them. Now, the advantageous thing about this is that if you're the real estate person, you don't have to maintain and take care of the building. The drawbacks there are that this type of scenario is probably going to be very challenging to get into, especially when you're getting started. Once you're bigger, then you're going to be able to find and network your way into those circles where those opportunities come up. But you're also probably going to lease to one tenant. Now, we'll talk about that in the 5th way and what my thoughts are on 5th way. The 5th way is a single site lease. Now, some large companies prefer to just release their property back from a real estate investor. For example, maybe like a Burger King or a Wendy's or something like that. The property might actually be owned by some real estate investor. It's a triple net lease, and the tenant is the brand name, right? And so what this means is that the tenant is basically responsible for the entire property. Now, you might be asking, that's taxes, insurance, all this type of stuff. Now, you might be asking, why would they do this? Here's why. Building all this stuff is pretty darn capital intensive, and these businesses already have to lay out a lot of money to get this stuff going. In order to lighten up their books and make it better for them, they'd rather offload that extra capital capital lifting to other investors, and those people can carry the weight, and then they don't have to worry about, oh man, we have to source so much extra money for these properties. That's where they come from. That's why they exist. And, they're pretty much a set and collect coupon clipping deal. It's not like value add opportunities there too much. I mean, there can be, but not really. Now, if it's a single site situation, here's why I don't like it. Because you got one tenant. What's it mean if you have one tenant? It means that yes, even though they're a nice big national brand, if they go broke or if hard times come upon them, you could be hosed. If they go out, because this building is actually very specific to them, and it might be very challenging to find a different tenant to take over their lease, let alone take it over at the rate that they were paying. Now, there's 1,000,001 different ways to make money in real estate, get in real estate, participate, and have fun, and make this a career if you want to. you can probably find a ton more ways than what I pointed out here in this video. I know that when I got started, that's actually something that kind of holds you up a little bit. You're thinking about, oh man, which one's the right one to do? It doesn't really matter. The more important thing, especially when you're getting started, is just to get started. Because once you get started, you can kind of figure out what you want to do. But I highly recommend that once you figure out something that you kind of like, stick with it. Don't hop from one thing to another. If you're doing long-term rentals, stay with long-term rentals. Don't go from long-term rentals to short-term rentals and then get some other retail office over here. Try and get really good at one thing and maximize the living crap out of it. I think you're going to go a lot further if you do this than if you try and do everything, because your brain can only function and think about one thing. A great example of this is recently my buddy is trying to get into real estate. Now, he wants to get into single family houses, which is fine. That's a great place to get started. And that's where I got started myself. So he was asking me a bunch of questions and I was able to help him out and answer quite a few of them. But what I realized is that I had become so used to looking at very large deals on multifamily that I started forgetting some of the basic things that go along with single family rentals. Now, you might be like, what do you mean forgetting some of the things? Well, it's actually easier, in my opinion, to do large rental or large multifamily properties than small multifamily properties, because you just send out an LOI. And the LOI can be a one-page, just here's kind of what we, unofficially agree to, not legally binding. But with like single family houses, it's a lot more cut and dry. There isn't, it's just different. So that kind of caught me off guard. He was asking me some questions that I didn't have answers to, and I told him I don't really have answers to this. I don't remember. I'm used to different deals. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when I say find something and kind of stick with it, right? If you do short-term rentals, figure out how to get really good at short-term rentals and just keep scaling it up. If you get really good at multifamily, stick with multifamily. If you get really good with land, stick with land until you get to a large enough size that you can kind of do that cross over. But it's going to take a while to get there. Anyways, that's kind of my summary of 5 different ways to start getting investing in real estate, 5 different types of real estates and avenues to get into, and my recommendation on staying focused on one type of real estate. Once you get into it, you'll find more success doing it that way. Anyways, I hope you found some value from this video. If you did, please like, share, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. See ya.